Hello, my name is Helene Furman Gold. Rabbi Lipp asked me to speak about community today. I wondered, how can I speak about my own spiritual journey while representing community as well? So many of you have been members of this community for years, even generations. I've only been a member for 6 years. Many of you have relatives with plaques on the synagogue wall, were married in the synagogue, have children who have gone through the preschool, religious school, and were b'nai mitzvah here. Many births and too often deaths. I fit none of those categories. Heck, I'm not even a New Yorker or a Brooklynite. I've just learned to pronounce Jeralaman, and I'm still struggling with Skimmerhorn. For the past 2 years on Yom Kippur, I watched the live stream from a hospital bed. Again, this year I cannot be there with you in person to share holiday greetings. While my illness may have different consequences, your reality and mine are much the same. With the pandemic or my life-threatening illness, our illusions of control and self-determination vanish, our handrails of predictability gone. The spiritual lessons for you and for me seem similar. We have each been challenged to think about our one precious life, the unknown, and how we can persist. I've read that Colenidre is the prayer Jews recite to protect us from what we most fear. Colenidre is never a solitary prayer. We chant it together. A little bit about my Judaism first. My personal journey started as the only child in a first-generation Jewish family in Camden, New Jersey, where I lived throughout childhood and college and my first year teaching at Camden High School. My father never graduated from high school and was unemployed through much of my childhood. As a result, instead of passing on the chanting of prayers, my family's chant was, "We are an unlucky family." My mother supported our family working at a dry cleaner. I grew up in a home where there was no apparent practice of Judaism. There were always 2 sets of dishes, one for meat and one for dairy. I never asked why. There were no Shabbos candles or Kiddush cups. There were no family stories or rituals, religious or otherwise. My family never spoke a word about our ancestral roots. My happiest childhood memories are my annual visits to Santa Claus and my yearly Easter bonnets. My mother wanted nothing more than to assimilate. They did the best they could, and I was loved. As soon as I could afford a car, I got out of Camden. I drove by myself as far away as I could to Seattle, Washington. The moment I drove through the Welcome to Seattle sign, I was off and running. In Seattle, I achieved extraordinary career accomplishments, mostly on behalf of people from economic backgrounds similar to my own. And just for fun, I played in a rock band which once performed with Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, and Peter Yarrow. Now that was spiritual. But in Seattle in the late 70s, it was easier to find a pirate than a Jew. Look it up. With several others, I started a secular social action group we named Kadima. Through the years, Kadima has grown into a flourishing progressive reform synagogue. Kadima is where I met my husband of 39 years when we were in a play about the Holocaust. Only then did I integrate Judaism into my life. Fast forward to the present. Jeff and I have a small but mighty family who sometimes live in Brooklyn and who are members of BHS. Now on to how my story and yours intersect. 6+ years ago, we bought a co-op in Brooklyn Heights on a street where I could pronounce the name. The very next day, we joined BHS. We requested a meeting with Rabbi Lip. In that meeting, he mentioned that people are different here in Brooklyn. They are tougher. Now, Serge is right about so many things, but boy was he wrong about that one. This is a community of good souls and soft hearts. Rabbi Serge is one of them. I speak here today as a recipient of that communal goodness which will never disappear despite the circumstances or times. I want to quote a few examples to make them real for you. I especially want to emphasize that most every experience I am about to describe was offered by a BHS member who I had either never met or who I had met but never been in their homes, met their children, or shared a meal. Quotes from people who were strangers to me just a few years ago, some half my age. I can represent you, our BHS community, because these quotes are you. Quote, I want to help you find a place to live during the 3 months the elevator in your building is out of commission. And she did. We've only just met recently, but would you like my husband and I to sit with you in the hospital? And of course we will open our home to Jeff so he can work while you're hospitalized. And they did. We heard you were in Connecticut when you had to return to New York without notice with no car. We will drive you back to Connecticut to help you pick up the things you left there. And they did. Of course I'll call my father-in-law who's on the board of the hospital. He's in Europe on business. It's the middle of the night, but I know he'd want to help you. And he did. We know you need a wheelchair, and we have one. Although it's snowing, we'll drive it to the Upper West Side right now. And they did. Not an exact quote, but almost. I'm making meatloaf, and I also have liverwurst. Would you like some? Never got the liverwurst, and thanks for that. But my freezer is filled with every version of chicken soup, and meals are delivered to my door weekly. So much gratitude. So many more incredible examples. I wish I could share all of them. Each offer of Rahmanis coming from one of those tough, long-time Brooklyn, New York strangers who are now my lifeline. I am just one example of why this synagogue matters this day and every day. The BHS community sustains our spirit in the best and worst of times, but especially in the moments between celebration and consolation. The quotes you heard certainly illustrate exceptional efforts, but the connection from which they germinated were quite ordinary. A random chat after services, attending a getting to know you dinner, taking my grandson to Pizza in the Hut, a chance encounter on a street corner with a familiar face. This synagogue of friends, neighbors, and strangers binds us in a communal covenant. In biblical times, ancient Israelites thought of the heart in much the way we think of the mind. The heart is the seat of wisdom. Last year, on Yom Kippur, the rabbi knowingly assigned me to read this passage from Deuteronomy 19. These words are Moses' final order to his people, as he knows that he himself will not make it to the promised land. I put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life. I have thought a lot about the phrase choose life over the past year. What did Moses interpret as God? I will leave that to wiser and more complex thinkers than myself. Here is my simple interpretation of choose life. No, we don't have choices about the families we were born into, how we die, or whether you and your children spend significant years of your lives living in a pandemic. To me, some of our circumstances seem random. My father's concept of good or bad luck. Yet I think that Moses was telling us that what distinguishes us as human, as alive, is our ability to make choices, even when faced with the seemingly unknowable and uncontrollable. Judaism gives us so many choices to call upon when seeking strength, gathering together in prayer, study, ritual, and song. Once again, Rabbi Serge offered me a spiritual lesson during one of my most difficult moments. You can face unprecedented challenges, the unknown, and be afraid, or you can be afraid and sing at the same time. The song Serge sent me was Kol Ha'olam Kulo. All the world is a narrow bridge, and the most important thing is not to be overwhelmed by fear. I sang it over and over until it became a prayer, until I was no longer afraid. Songs have become my way of praying, even when the song is Motown. In the past 18 months, every one of us has had to alter our lives as we know it. It has required stamina when we felt that we had run out. It has been more than a year of wandering in the desert, trying to uncover if and where we have choices, then finding ourselves, our resilience, and the realization that we need others to help us do that. And if for a fleeting moment you start feeling disconnected, remember there are amazing strangers in this community waiting to meet you who will add so much to your life. Don't miss those opportunities. It's our covenant. The once great Jewish philosopher Leonard Cohen wrote words which have become the prayer that helps me find my spirit. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Thank you, and Gemar Tov.